Konnichiwa.
Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast.
Kia ora, Catherine.
Konnichiwa, Jane.
Is it autumn yet?
Well, there's little signs of it. There's a few teeny tiny signs of it, but not temperature-wise.
No. What's your teeny tiny signs of autumn?
Well, some leaves are falling off the tree outside my window.
Right.
And here and there I see more leaves fluttering around. So I think they're trying to show us that it's coming into autumn.
Yeah. Well, they've just given up. They've just given up and died.
Yeah, maybe that's it. They're just
hot.
Tired out and they want to fall off and go, I've had enough of the summer. Oh, it's so hot. And it's been, July, August, September.
Yeah, it's been a long summer.
It's been very long. We shouldn't complain, but it has actually been really, really hard and tiring. So we're looking forward to it disappearing.
Yeah. And this morning I was actually out walking my dog and I noticed that the spiders have really cranked up their spider web making, and that happens in autumn. And these are these really giant spiders. They like, if they bite you, you won't die. Type spiders. They're sort of big, black and yellow stripy bodied spiders. They're quite large. Yeah, and they build these massive webs, and sometimes the webs go across the road and sometimes you walk into them. It's not great.
No way. How do they build them across the road?
Oh, they do it at night when there's obviously nothing. And then so in the morning, if you're the first one to walk across the road, you might end up with a spider web in your face. But this is where the whole like spider webs as a decoration for Halloween come from. And I always wondered about that. I was like, what's that spider webs, you know? But because in Fukushima, at this time of the year, it's just spider webs everywhere, across all the trees and all of the bushes. So that is why. So I know it's like autumn has started. The spiders are cranking up their spider web.
Didn't know that.
Production.
That is absolutely fascinating, right? Why? Why were spider webs? Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Very educational morning. And have you been, aside from looking at spider webs, have you also been clicking on the TV to watch a little bit of the Rugby World Cup?
Yes, been keeping an eye on the Rugby World Cup. Really enjoyed a certain game between a small island nation and a big rugby power, where the small island nation won. That was so exciting. Well done.
That was.
Fiji.
Thank you. You said it. Fiji, they did so well. Amazing.
Yeah, and, they did well.
Japan is also doing its best. They did lose to England, but boy, did they put on a fight. I was so proud of them. I was just egging them on, and after that, during the day, there were a couple of people I came across who were like, did you watch it? Did you watch it? There's a group of Japanese men who I associate with, and we're all in the rugby thing at the moment. So it's quite fun. Japanese are often renowned for not doing small banter at the beginning of meetings, but we are doing rugby talk at the beginning of our meetings. And those who are not rugby people are kind of giving us a bit of a side eye, but we're enjoying it. So we also talk about baseball just to make things even, right? We've got to talk about baseball.
I can talk about baseball too.
You can talk about it too, right? Your favorite team won the series, right?
The C League, the Central League, that's right. And they are going through to the Japan series. So yeah, very, very exciting for us baseball followers here in Japan this time of year. Lots of sporting events to follow.
There's lots. I mean, the Japanese, what is it?
What's that? What are you doing?
I can't remember the sport that goes over the net.
Over the net. Volleyball.
Thank you.
Ah, yes, volleyball is happening.
Yes, so the Japanese volleyball team are doing really, really well, female volleyball team. And I've also noticed that the Japanese basketball team are doing super well. So there's a lot of really good sports that perhaps I wasn't really interested in the past that I've sort of built up this interest in, especially the basketball, I have to say.
Well, we are lucky. We get to see all of this on regular TV here in Japan. Japan does a great job of televising all of these sporting events for people to watch without having to subscribe to anything in particular. So
indeed. And I'm actually watching the Rugby World Cup in Japanese for the Japanese broadcast, and I'm really thankful for that. It's quite good because it gives me a bit of the education around how to say all the terms, you know, in rugby in Japanese.
Right.
So I can actually speak Japanese rugby terms
No,
now.
you're learning your Japanese rugby.
Learning my Japanese
Right.
rugby. But the other thing that's helping me is, I have to say, is the rundowns that are being on the Japan Rugby Weekly podcast.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes, they're back in full steam now, and it's really great because Doug Pickin, the translator for the
Dynavores?
Dynavores, is leading that. And we've seen also, just in recent episodes, Jess Sushon, who was on one of our former episodes on Jandals in Japan. She's also giving him a little bit of help there, and it's really fun hearing them. And so if you're interested in rugby and you're just dying for it everywhere you can get it, the Japan Rugby Weekly podcast is a great one to go to if you want some Kiwiisms, rugby talk, and a bit of banter. They are great fun, and they're ramping up again through Rugby World Cup and the coming season for Japan tournaments here too. So put that on your dial.
So who have we got this week?
Monique Holmes. Right, so Monique may not be a household name to you all, but we really are so excited to bring her because thanks to Kylie Archer, the Trade Commissioner at NZTE, we got to know about Monique because she is the recipient of the Global Fisheries Scholarship in 2023. I think I'm too excited about rugby and I'm getting tongue-tied this morning, Jane. She's got a background in marine biology that led her to doing work in Māori fisheries and aquaculture, and that also led her to doing this scholarship that brought her to Japan. She ended up doing a trainee role with Nissui as well. Amazing story, full of really interesting information. So if you're thinking about how do you get a scholarship to Japan, and if you're particularly interested in this area, fisheries and aquaculture, listen in because it's a super episode. I hope you got everything you needed out of that, everyone. I just didn't have my ears or eyes or mouth in action this morning.
Yeah, let's hear from Monique. Kia ora, Monique. Welcome to the Jandals in the Japan podcast. Great to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Kia ora.
So our warm-up question for you today is, what is one thing that you're going to miss from Japan now you're back in New Zealand?
Oh, public transport is pretty topical for me. So I live in Wellington and we have good public transport by New Zealand standards, but no way near anything compared to Tokyo. And I miss not just being able to take a train everywhere that comes every like 2 to 5 minutes. So I'm never late for anything, never late for work. And I miss that the most because now if you miss your bus, you have to wait another 30 minutes to get to work and then you're very, very late. So yeah, definitely. I'm missing the metro for sure.
There you go. Catherine, you live in Tokyo, obviously. That's a nice thing to refresh your memory that it's something to treasure, isn't it?
Thank you, Monique, because it really is an absolute gem about Tokyo and we totally take it for granted. Right? We just expect the trains to be there and everything to run, but how on earth does Tokyo run all of those subway systems, plus the general trains that go around and all kinds of networks? I have no idea, but it's an amazing thing about Japan. Thanks for saying that. For me, it's the same, right? I mean, the trains, but I also really love the redelivery service in Japan. So people will deliver to you, and if you're not at home, they'll leave a note in your box saying, I'll be back, ring us and tell us when you want us to come back. And so we can ring and identify a time frame, like 2 to 4 or 6 till 8, and they will definitely come back then. Whereas in New Zealand, maybe that doesn't happen, right? The bloke will be not turning up or, whatever. But that's another thing on the efficiency of Japan. You cannot match it, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? When we send out microphones for our podcast to people who we're recording with in Japan, they get them the next day. And it's like amazing. So amazing. So efficient. Fantastic.
And Jane, do you have something that's really lovely like that you would miss if you didn't have it, or that makes you think about how just in this moment about Japan that's amazing?
Well, you stole my one about that.
Oh, sorry about that.
I think it's the convenience store. Just that you can do everything there. Like I can send boxes, I can pay bills if I need to, I can buy a ticket to a concert, I can photocopy stuff if I need to, I can get
you can fax.
We can fax things, yes. One can fax, print out photos, buy all kinds of food and whatever. And even my convenience store in my neighborhood stocks things that my kids ask me for at the very last minute that they need for school. And I'm like, I can't believe that you have not told me that you needed, what, like, it was once, it was calligraphy paper for doing, the Japanese
Mm.
calligraphy. Kids do that in school, and they're like, I need calligraphy paper today. And I'm like, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, oh my God, maybe they have some at the 7-Eleven. They have it at the 7-Eleven. So yeah, 10 minutes later, I had calligraphy paper in my hand. It was like, this would never happen anywhere else. Yeah,
Love it.
The New Zealand dairy pales in comparison to the convenience stores.
I cannot
But you got me
compare.
there, Jane. You said you can print photos at the convenience store. I didn't know that.
Oh, yes, very
Oh.
easily. Yes,
Oh,
different
okay.
sizes and things.
That
So
might be this week's challenge. I'm going to go and print a photograph. Fantastic. Wow. Monique, we're so happy to have you, and we'll put your full bio in the show notes. We know you've got a background in marine biology, and that's led you to doing a lot of work in Māori fisheries. But we're so keen to hear your background. Tell us about growing up in New Zealand.
Yeah, so I grew up in Tauranga, which is a bit north where I am now, which is Wellington, and it's very beautiful, lovely beaches. I grew up coastal, so I spent a lot of time in that environment. And then I moved down to Wellington for university. And then I fell in love with Wellington, actually. It's such a beautiful city here as well. And I sort of randomly picked it out of a book of majors that you could do at university. And then I just absolutely loved it. I did my undergrad, and then I was like, this is not enough. So I stayed and I did my master's. And we're very fortunate that in Wellington, the university is Victoria, and they have a coastal ecology lab, which is right along the south coast. So you like look out onto the ocean. And that's where I was based
nice.
at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so sometimes you see dolphins if you're lucky, and seals and stuff like that, like on a good day. And during my time at uni, I did some summer scholarships that are run through the university, and sometimes like other companies or lecturers that need research done over the summer break. And I was very fortunate enough to be introduced to Te Ohu Kaimoana, which is created out of the fishery settlement. So they have like a long history there. And I spent a summer with them, and then I went back to university, finished my master's, and after that I came back the day of handing my thesis in. Actually, I was feeling very lost, and I walked in, I said, can I have a job? And then a week later I started there full time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a huge relief. But yeah,
Yeah.
after I finished uni, I was like, what am I doing with myself? And it was on my walk home, so I just thought I'd pop in, and then I was like, can I have a job? And
There you go. Wow, right? Being so active throughout studies, but also just taking the chance and going in and saying, can I have a job? Well done.
But yeah, so it worked out really well. And that's sort of what introduced me to this process. So as I just mentioned before, Te Ohu Kaimoana is part of the fisheries settlement, which is also connected to other companies, which is Moana and Sealord. And so together they, in the past, have been running this scholarship, and I was fortunate to work with like previous recipients as well. And that's sort of how I got exposed to it. And then when the time came to apply, when the applications opened, I jumped at the opportunity and was very fortunate to be supported by the people I was working with at the time. And then, yeah, so I applied, but unfortunately then COVID happened. So there was a whole lot of delay. So I went through this process a wee while ago now. I think I applied 2019, and then I went this year, 2023. So there was a longer time
big
in
wait.
between.
Yeah.
Yeah, but well worth it, I would say. Well worth the wait.
Have you had any connection with Japan before you came on that scholarship?
No, none whatsoever. So it was really incredible, actually. I think kind of the only sort of dealings I'd had or understanding of Japan is with my sister. She's like quite into a lot of like Japanese culture things and food. So we would like share those experiences together. And so sometimes I watch anime with her or Studio Ghibli films. And I was actually really fortunate she was able to come visit me for a couple of weeks and have a holiday while I was there. And it was really cool to like to get to see her to experience it as well. Was like a really awesome feeling for me. So that was sort of my only kind of really brief understanding of Japan before I got there, to be honest.
You pulled out a good point there too, right? The long termers like us who've been in Japan 20 years, when we have our friends visit or family visit, we see Japan through their eyes. It's really magical. So I'm glad you got to do that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So how do you apply for this scholarship? Where does it rest? I mean, where do you find this information?
Cool. So it rests with Moana now. So they administrate the scholarship, run the whole process. And I think the best way to sort of stay in the loop of when it's coming up in advertising and the application process is through their website, through their careers tab on their website, and also through their social media. They advertise it there as well. So the process can be a little lengthy because you do need to do some language study before you go. So usually you find out, then they allow you like a year of language, so like still doing your day-to-day life, and then you sort of do language study in your spare time or after work and the weekends, and then the next year you'll go.
Wow.
So yeah, the
That's
whole process can be quite
quite a
lengthy.
lead up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really amazing to invest a year in language study. So that's Japanese language study.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what kinds of things are you learning? What sort of Japanese? Because there's different kinds of Japanese language, but what are the kinds of topics or themes that they're teaching you?
Because I'm based in Wellington and the company is based in Auckland, I just found a tutor, and so we just went through the Genki book and just sort of basics to get N5 was the sort of end goal for me in that year. What I would say was it was good because my tutor had lived in Japan for 5 years, so they would talk about their experience working and sort of like cultural nuances that were really useful, and sort of like key phrases I thought was probably the most useful part out of that for me, because you learn must form Japanese and then nobody speaks to you that way and you're just confused all the time.
No, exactly, right? But you've got it right. It's not just the language, it's that cultural overlay as well, right? And knowing when to use things. So no one uses must. I have that same thing when I came to Japan is, hang on, that's not my textbook. What's going on here? Yeah, so it's good to know must form of verbs, right? You can always go down from there, but it's harder if you learn more casual Japanese to go up.
Definitely harder to go up.
So, wow, that is so cool. They really did invest to make sure that you had a good chance here and weren't just thrown in the deep end, as it were, if I can use a water
Yeah.
pun there.
I would say it did still feel like the deep end. This was
Of
my first time
course,
being in
yeah.
a country that wasn't an English speaking country. And so that was at first a little bit overwhelming, just because there's like everything around you is not in your native tongue, and native speakers speak so fast, which also I had to like take that on board and slow down my English when I was speaking English with people, because I was like, oh, I'm talking so quickly. But it's all part of it, and it actually like was quite a cool experience to be able to see that on the other side, because like in New Zealand we all speak English, you're around like English signs all the time, so you just take it for granted how comfortable it is being in your native language. So that was a really cool experience as well, to sort of see that dichotomy, I guess.
Definitely. There's nothing like being rendered illiterate to humble you and make you sort of rethink how you, do things. So, gosh. So you arrived here in Japan, and then what happened? Tell us a little bit about what you got up to during the scholarship.
Cool. So when I first arrived in Japan, the like very next day, I was met with somebody from Nissui who was like my, I guess, minder, I would say, the person who looked after me the most.
Yeah.
And so they met me, they took me into the company to introduce me to everybody, and it just happened to have a board meeting that day. So my first day, I went and introduced myself to their board. So I had to prep a little like, hello, I'm Monique in Japanese, which was fine. And then they took me out for lunch, and then they sort of just gave me a rundown on how everything was going to work. So for 2 weeks, I just went to language school. So I had like it was more of like a private tutor type setup. Like I did lessons one-on-one, and I would go there for about 4 to 5 hours a day for 2 weeks. So that was for the first half of January. And then in February, I spent a month. In the mornings, I would go to my language school, and then in the afternoon, I would go into the company, and I would spend a few days with different departments of the company, and that would give me presentations or take me to other subsidiary companies that they dealt with, or sort of companies that had relationships that they thought was important to sort of show to me, to teach me about what they do. So that sort of meant my schedule moved around quite a bit in terms of language school, but still making sure I was finding time every day to get some study in. And then after that, I went to Kyushu for 2 months and I spent time at 5 different companies there. So I spent about 2 weeks, sometimes a little less at each company. And there I just focused on learning about the aquaculture they do. And then after that, I came back to Tokyo for a month and I prepared for a final presentation. So that involved going into the office as well to do the work and also going back to language school to help me sort of prep for that final speech. And then I did a final presentation to some of the Nissui board members. And then a few people from New Zealand came over sort of to be the representatives, and some members from the embassy came. And then after that, they took me out for an incredible meal. And then I was all finished up, and I was very fortunate to spend another month in Japan just on my own time, sort of just traveling around a little bit.
Wow, what a whirlwind and amazing experience for you.
Absolutely.
What was one of your top insights that you came away from that experience with?
One of my top insights that I also focused my final presentation on was just the dedication and commitment to constant innovation and research within the company. And so I think there's a constant, my experience from watching was there was a constant drive to be better and improve on the systems that were already in place. And I thought that was really fascinating because in New Zealand, our aquaculture is still fairly young. We don't aquaculture a great diversity of species. We currently mainly only aquaculture 3. There are a few small scale here and there, but the big ones is just 3 species. And so just seeing this sheer scale and size of aquaculture in Japan was incredible, and just seeing how they were finding new workarounds of the issues that they were facing. And it was just like very incredible because I think across both countries we're going to see similar issues. So climate change is an issue, waters are warming up and it's harder to farm in these conditions. So just seeing that sort of future proofing of the industry for them through research and innovation, I think was really incredible and something that I'm very interested. I think that was why I sort of took more of an interest in it, because I feel it plays into my background a little bit more. Like I quite enjoyed that sort of hands-on side of it.
Amazing. So what sorts of innovations, can I ask you that? Like there was something X and then they made it slightly better by X2 or 3. Is there something like that you could give us an example? Because I'm so interested to know what kind of things were changing and that you could see, right? And that you can obviously, when you come back to New Zealand or when you are back in the field, you can think about, oh, I saw that in Japan, they did this.
Yeah. So I think 2 examples that were the most standout for me were submergible sea cages and dealing with fish disease. So the sea cages is they experience typhoon season in Japan. And so they have made these cages that you submerge them to about 8 meters of depth, and then you refloat them for feeding and checking on the fish, and then you submerge them. And so when there's like bad weather, the cages stay undamaged. So the fish, because when the cages are damaged, the fish escape, and it's a lot of, you can get sort of waste in the water and things like that. So it allows them to be able to farm in rougher conditions and sort of cater to the climate that they have more so. And just the scale of them and watching them rise out of the water, like I never tired of seeing it. Every day it impressed me. It's like, this is amazing.
It comes up in the typhoon or goes down in the typhoon?
It
Go
sinks
down,
in the
right?
typhoon.
Down. Sinks in the typhoon. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
So it's a safe, literally safe harbor for them down below. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's the other one then?
The other one was fish disease. So I spent some time at a research center in Saiki, Oita, and they had created sort of a program that could be used across many companies that farmed in Japan that were part of the Nissui sort of grouping. And it was just standardizing how they test the fish and setting up protocols or manuals on how people could do it themselves. So they were sort of upskilling the people that were already in these companies to be able to test the fish, see what was going on, and find the right treatment or solution so that it didn't spread further and that it could be done immediately and on the ground. And so it was really cool meeting those people who had come up with this program and all these standards that could be used across all these different places. And then when I went to different companies, I was able to see them using those manuals and doing the tests and stuff like that. And that was really cool because fish disease is a big problem in aquaculture just in general. So it was really cool to see that they had created this whole program out of it that had solely come out of this one research company, and that was being sort of spread across different Nissui companies. Was incredible.
Well, we can so sense your excitement. How much fun you had. You weren't just dragged into something that you were like, oh, I have another trip down to the ocean.
Fish disease. Oh God.
Totally seem to have got into that. What did you find though on the other side of things that might have been a little bit of a challenge for you? That, oh, I didn't know that was going to come. I wish I'd learned a bit more about that before. Did you have anything like that happen in Japan?
As I say, one of the incredibly good things about Japan is how hospitable they are, the manaaki you receive, but also on the other side, it can be really extreme. And that was my experience when I was with some companies, is that they were so keen to look after me that it was just a lot. So it was like every day, it was like, after work, we'll come pick you up and we'll do an activity. And it was a really incredible experience, but I just wasn't used to it. And that was, I think, probably a cultural shock for me, that I was like, oh, these people want to spend a lot of time with me. And so it was just, but it was really eye-opening because I got some really incredible experience out of it that I wouldn't have done on my own, or I wouldn't have thought to go to these places. So it sort of balanced out in the end, where I could reflect and be like, if I had been like, oh no, I don't feel like doing anything this weekend, like I would have missed out on all these incredible experiences, and being able to see the things that they really enjoyed about their town or their city that I was staying in at the time. So I think it was like a big sort of learning experience for me, and almost like a maturing experience, to just be like, I just need to sort of say yes to a lot of opportunities that are presented to me, and, you know, be a little more social sometimes. But yeah, so that was probably one of the things that did sort of catch me off guard initially, but and it varied where I was. Like some people were like extremely welcoming, and others were like very welcoming, but they sort of gave me like a little more free time or time to do things by myself. So it really did vary where I went.
It's taken very seriously, isn't it? This omotenashi, and it's all been decided who's looking after you on Saturday, who's looking after you on Sunday, and what you're doing and where you're going and all these things. And it's like, well, did you ask me if I wanted to do anything on Saturday or Sunday? Yeah, because quite often my husband will also be like, oh, I've got people from Sweden, so I'm taking them to this place on Saturday. Is that okay? I'm like, did you ask them? Did they want to go? You know, just check in on that. Yeah. It's not like you belong to them, but they're responsible for you. So they take that incredibly seriously, and they want you to have the best time possible. And yes, they're super proud to introduce all of their local things to see and do in their town. And like you said, when you lean into it, later you can look back and go, that was amazing. It might have been a little bit full on at the time, but it was amazing. So I'm glad you leaned into it. Yeah,
you've only got that moment, and you miss it if you don't. And I think too, you've got to just pull that extra energy, because you are wider than yourself. You're this ambassador, right, for the company. The people who've sent you on the scholarship, they've paid for that. They expect so much, right? And they're watching you as that person as well. So it really means a lot. And, you know, ultimately you're representing New Zealand, so they can assess you as, oh, New Zealanders are like this. They don't really care about going out on the weekends or joining our program. But in fact, you've just done the opposite, and you've shown enthusiasm. And as you just said yourself, it actually made you have a maturity moment as well, which is fantastic. That's what a scholarship's for, right? To give you your insights to yourself as well.
Absolutely. You know, it was very incredible.
And what was one thing you got to do that you probably would never have done on your, if you were just tootling around by yourself over there?
One of them was actually when I was in Miyazaki, I went to Kagoshima, and I think it was Kirishima Jinja, and I dressed up in a kimono and walked around the shrine. And I probably wouldn't have done that on my own, but I was very fortunate when I was at this particular company that one of the people who was assigned to me that weekend to look after me, their wife had planned this whole day, and I got hay fever when I was there, which I don't get hay fever in New Zealand, but very common in Japan, and apparently I just was part of it. I also got hay fever. And they came to see me on the Friday and they're like, oh, we heard you're not feeling so well. Like, do you just want to rest this weekend? And I was like, no, actually, like it's just hay fever. I just need some nasal spray and I'll be fine. And I'm so glad I did because his wife had planned this incredible day, and like the people who were doing the kimono dressing like didn't typically work on that day, and she'd rung them up and especially asked them to come in because I was visiting from so far away. And that was sort of my reminder that is like, imagine if I had been like, oh no, I'm not, I just stayed home because I had hay fever, would have felt so silly. So I was like, that was kind of my reminder of like, actually just get on board with all these things and give it a go, because like the outcome was so amazing. And yeah, that was very cool, but something that I probably wouldn't have gone out of my way myself to do, but I'm very glad I was able to get that experience.
Yeah, there's so much in behind there too, right? With her organizing other people on their day off to get you in there and look after you. And when she has to tell them, oh, she's not able to do it, the sort of the letting down, her face. And there's all that comes in as well. And it's like that, I guess, in every culture. But in Japan, there's, as Jane said before, they're so intense in wanting to make this a super special thing for you. And so there's all of that becomes a really big thing. So for you to say yes and go through with it, fantastic. I wonder if they got you nasal spray. Did they get you something?
Yeah, somebody took me to the pharmacy.
Yeah, see? Of course.
And then I just got my Google Translate out. It was like looking through, because I feel like their over-the-counter medication is stronger than ours is for like cold stuff as well. Like I found that it was just a little bit stronger than what I was used to taking in New Zealand. So I felt just like,
you must have got a good one. Please let us know.
Yeah, what did you get? What is this magic stuff that they gave you?
Sure.
We find it a little bit weaker, but anyway, maybe it's perfect because it actually, Japan medicine is made for afflictions that help, affect you in Japan. So because you got hay fever in Japan, it would have been better than, say, if you'd brought your New Zealand one, if you were hay fever sufferer. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I don't get hay fever in New Zealand. It was a completely new thing
neither,
for me.
but I get it here.
Wow. How does this scholarship, do you think, benefit New Zealand and Japan more broadly? And, would you do it again? And would you do it the same way?
So initially the scholarship was set up a very long time ago, sort of like when the companies were all fairly new, and the intention was to upskill New Zealand workers in Japanese business, particularly in fisheries, and send them back to New Zealand and apply that skill to our companies, to grow our companies. And so I think it has been doing that. I was the 15th recipient of the scholarship. So there was a reasonable lapse of time due to COVID from people attending. So there's a long legacy and a long history behind me of the scholarship. And most of the people who have gone through the process still work in one of those companies. So they have sort of brought and shared that knowledge. Some of them have gone on to other things as well. I think somebody actually ended up working in the embassy in Japan for a little bit as well. So there's been like really cool experiences to come out of it. So the intention of the scholarship was also to strengthen those relationships between New Zealand and Japan and sort of keep that connection going through having this person sort of be upskilled and trained between the two companies. It's a really incredible opportunity for New Zealanders to be showcased sort of the scale that things can occur on. And also there are a lot of similarities, I feel, between Japanese and in particular Māori culture and how it's applied to business. Like there's one of the things that stood out for me was this real dedication to acknowledging where you come from, which is a huge part of Māori culture with your whakapapa, so all the things that have come before you. And it was the same that I was genuinely surprised that she was quite important to them as well. So one of the things I did was I went back to the city in which Nissui was founded in. They talked to me through the origins of the company, and it was really important for them to share that with me. I sort of noted. So I think there are a lot of similarities across, and it helps to build those relationships with those shared sort of understandings and shared connections. Japan is fairly advanced in how they do a lot of things, and it's not that New Zealand is not advanced. We're just younger in our industries in some of our industries. So sort of getting that experience and that history and that context and sort of their maybe learnings and failings and how they worked around it is really beneficial to us to sort of expand and continue to build the industries that we have. If I could do it again, absolutely. I would go tomorrow if they let me. I absolutely loved it. It was hard, I will admit. It was tiring. And part of that is just being in another country that doesn't speak English. Part of that was the Japanese component to it. I will admit my Japanese is pretty rubbish, so that didn't help. But yeah, no, absolutely. If I could do it again, I would, but I would hopefully be better at Japanese the next time I go.
Well, it sounds like you're going to recommend this opportunity to others. What's
Absolutely.
key for them to get their application together and make it nice and shipshape and appeal to the people who are deciding? I expect it's people who are in Nissui and maybe Moana together looking at the applications. But what do you think was really key? Like, you must have to write a profile or why I want to do this scholarship. But what else is in there to help others who are listening to you going, oh my God, I want to do exactly what Monique's done. That sounds like it's a cool experience.
I think it's also having a general interest in what will come out of your time there. So for me, I'm really interested in this industry. I've worked in this industry and I see my future being in this industry. And so I think that was perhaps part of the appeal of when I interviewed. It was that it goes beyond just, oh, I want to go to Japan and have an incredible experience. Because that's a huge driver for all of us. But also it's, what am I going to do once I've had this experience, and how am I going to give back from this experience? Because that's the purpose, right? Like you're saying, you're sent over as an ambassador, but you're doing this for something that's much bigger than yourself, and being able to put it in that context, I think, is really useful and sort of shows that you're a bit more serious about this. But yeah, I won't lie, part of it is, you just want to go live in Japan and it's incredible. So yeah, I mean, there's no lying about that. But I think just it's the thinking beyond that that's quite critical as well. And also having a general interest in, I think, just an understanding of the industry. I don't think you have to have worked in it or studied it, but just sort of prepare yourself with sort of some context around it. And I think you can do that through a bit of reading, or maybe just emailing people that in these companies and just saying, hey, can I have a chat and get an understanding of how these things work? I don't think you necessarily have to have that background, but just some understanding or willingness to learn is very helpful, because some of the things you do can be very technical in those industries. And I was very fortunate that I'd been exposed to some of it before that helped with the language barrier and the experience. But that's not necessarily a requirement that you have to have, but it is helpful. So if you could do some of that legwork yourself, if you don't have that background, I think that just shows that you're pretty keen or wanting to be a part of it and wanting to learn.
One of the points there, the technical thing, right? You can actually, without language, show that you understand the technical side of things, right? And that really shows a different level, that you get the industry, you get that point that they're trying to get across. So knowing the technical stuff can still be a massive advantage, even if you don't have the vocab to tell what you can show it basically from what you're doing.
Absolutely. I don't think I'll ever have the technical vocab in Japanese of these things, but you pick up on
surprised. You will be surprised, right?
So pick up on quite strange words. Like I ended up learning the word for like anesthetic and like the word for swim bladder and a fish and things like that before I could like
just exposure,
like, I'm
right?
thirsty, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you learned the word for hay fever as well. There you go. But you see some opportunities. What did you sort of think? There's some really great opportunities between New Zealand and Japan that I sort of observed, or I could think could happen. Did you have anything like that occur while you were here or on your way back, or now that you're back?
I think this sort of feeds back into what I was talking about earlier with the research and innovation. I think a sharing of knowledge and sharing of resources in that particular space would be extremely beneficial to New Zealand. But also I think for Japan, it could open up sort of a new school of thought by also sort of bringing New Zealand into the conversation, a bit of Kiwi ingenuity. So I think we could help each other in that kind of regard. And I think it's going to become really important because particularly with these industries, you're now requiring like a social license to operate realistically. And also just the environment is changing. We view the ocean in a different way, and it has a lot of importance to a lot of different people for different reasons. And there are a lot of users of the ocean. So there's a lot of competing priorities in that space. So I just think, how can we do what we're doing better and in a more sustainable or more environmentally friendly way is awesome. And that comes out of research and, further development. So I think sharing those capabilities that Japan already has, and we have as well in New Zealand together, and sort of bringing together those research would be incredible, and something I would be very interested in the future, actually, if that was a
Fabulous.
possibility.
Just saying, put that out there.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
But is there an exchange back? Does anybody come from Nissui to New Zealand, and maybe not exactly the same fashion, but in some way? Is there anything that you know of that happens in that form?
Not that I'm aware of. I know there is a Japanese Nissui staff member who does work in Sealord, and that helps keep the connection
Great.
between those two companies. I did meet somebody who had just come back from that. So I think they do like 4-year stints in New Zealand. So fairly long time. In sort of a similar capacity to me as like a trainee, I'm not sure 100%. Not that I'm aware of.
So the Monique that went to Japan had some aspirations or some dreams potentially, and the Monique that came back from Japan has probably a different set of glasses on after that experience. Anything that you're seeing now, you're like, wow, maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that in the future after your experience over there?
It definitely solidified for me that I loved working in that industry and I miss working in that industry. I've sort of taken a step in a different direction with my career. I'm currently working in government. There's marginal overlap in my current role, and it sort of did make me come back and think, oh, I sort of miss that day-to-day sort of understand. Yeah, I miss that. I just missed it, actually.
Miss the fish, yeah.
Yeah, I
Being
miss the
there.
fish.
Yeah.
But also it made me sort of think that I want to maybe be more involved or more interested in operational work so much. So my background has been predominantly policy so far. But yeah, just sort of getting to have that hands-on experience when I was in Japan, I was like, actually, I think operational would be an incredible route to go down and to learn more about and sort of see how things are happening in reality in New Zealand, because sometimes policy can be a little detached from the day-to-day life of how these industries play out. So I think, yeah, that would be a nice sort of
Definitely complementary, right? Like they're going to help each other in the future, that's for sure. Yeah, both skills.
Yeah.
Maybe you could get us some other practical exchange or secondment from where you are into an industry, into one of the, I'm not going to say where, but that gives you that more practical experience to inform the policy that you're working on, right? As Jane said, it's interactional, so you could come up with an idea.
Yeah.
Surely there's something out there.
Might be something.
Yeah, it's exciting. So tell us a bit more about representing New Zealand and your culture while you were in Japan.
It was a really awesome experience, but I felt like I had very big shoes to fill in that regard. So the scholarship is offered through companies that have a history through the fishery settlement, which comes out of the Treaty of Waitangi. So there's a strong connection to Māoridom within these companies and within this program. And so I was really pleasantly surprised, I think, to see how much of an interest that people took in Māori culture and how much sort of understanding they had whilst I was in Japan. But also you are the only, in a lot of these places, you're the only sort of foreigner and therefore the only New Zealander. So you become the expert on
New
all
Zealand,
things.
yes.
Yeah, in New Zealand. And also part of that, an extension of it is part of everything to do with Māori culture. So that was quite an interesting and challenging part of it as well, as like, oh, you have to think really hard before you answer certain questions. And it was some funny things that came out of it. Like somebody asked me if Māori worship pigs, and I was like, oh, not quite. Like, why would you ask that? And they're like, oh, the last person who'd come to this company from New Zealand was really into pig hunting. And so they must have talked about it a lot. And then so they'd sort of made this connection. So it was like that made me very aware that everything I say and do is now going to be held to the only thing, So I was like, okay, now I have to sort of think about how I want to come across as an individual, but also how I want to represent myself as a Māori and how I want to represent Māori culture and New Zealand culture in Japan. So that was also really important to me, but also really grounding for me to like make sure that I was staying grounded in who I was and who I am as a Māori and my culture and my heritage, to make sure that I'm doing a good job of sharing it with these people who have a genuine interest in it. So that was quite a cool part of it as well.
Good on you for asking. Why are you asking me about that instead of just going, no, where did you get that from?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, it came from someone who had talked a lot about pig hunting. Oh, some people like doing that.
Yeah.
Because this connection in Japan between nature and people is very rooted in Japanese culture and Shinto and all of this. So I can see how they might have come up with that idea, or it sort of got remembered in that way, right? This connection between nature and people, but not quite accurate potentially.
Yeah. Well, not where I'm from anyway.
But again, our comments represent our country, right? So talking about a certain thing is how they'll say, oh, New Zealand believes this. New Zealand, right? And so in my opinion, or just my experiences, like making it contained within you is also quite important. But how interesting. That's a really good observation. So Monique, do you have any questions for us?
I have quite a sort of generic question that when I was in Japan, I really, really missed flat whites and scones and cheese scones. I missed them. That was the only thing I missed, actually, pretty much, was a flat white and a cheese scone. Is there anything that you desperately miss from New Zealand food-wise, or coffee or drinks?
Flat whites and cheese scones, pretty much nailed it there.
Yep.
Fish and
chips. When I was back recently, I just had a cheese scone frenzy and was testing them all over the place and going, well, that one was better than that one, and that one was really good. And my youngest brother loves cheese scones, so I'd send him little reports on my cheese scone excursion around town. Awesome. Yeah, especially with the melted butter. You just can't get it. And I think sometimes let's just leave them there, because it's a really wonderful thing to look forward to when you're back in New Zealand. It really, I'd love them here, but also I kind of want them to stay there.
Yeah.
The ones you do find are not up to you should probably just not go there. It's just like when we go back to New Zealand, we don't eat sushi in New Zealand, okay? Because it's why would you? Like just don't.
I've been holding off eating ramen since coming back, because I actually never had eaten ramen in New Zealand prior to going to Japan. So the first time I ever ate it was in Japan, in Kyushu too, and it was incredible. And I just don't want to spoil the memory. So I'm like,
no, don't spoil the memory.
He's like, we should go for ramen. I'm like, oh, maybe not.
Well, unless it's super, super amazing. I know there's a really great restaurant in Christchurch, Kinji, and they have great ramen and absolutely amazing Japanese food. So if you're going to miss Japanese food and you really, really want it, make a trip to Christchurch and go there.
It's just in Christchurch,
I tried it there and I was like, I actually might have to change my bias against Japanese food in New Zealand. And it was totally fantastic. And I thank the person who took me there to change my views. So there we go. But cheese scones, no, please let the cheese reside in New Zealand, and maybe it's our butter and our flour that makes things different, and the milk, I don't know, but they're lovely, right? Thanks for that. That's so cool. Well, Monique, congratulations on your first podcast.
Thank you.
And we're so glad that it was the Jandals in Japan podcast. Thanks for telling us about this amazing time you had in Japan. We know it's not going to be your last trip here. Not at all. And we know once you get Japan in your DNA, it's going to stay. We look forward to hearing from you in the future and keeping in touch. And hopefully we'll see you in New Zealand sometime too for a cheese scone.
Yeah, sounds great.
Wow, what a fantastic conversation with Monique.
That was so exciting. I didn't want to finish today.
I really enjoyed hearing about her experience.
She really made the most of it, didn't she?
She did. It took me back to those first days when you get to Japan for the very first time and everything's a new experience. It's really draining. As she mentioned, she felt very sort of tired, but she didn't let that stop her from leaning into all of these things that people were so generously setting up for her.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I remember the first trip for me to Japan was in the heat of summer, and we were in a New Zealand fair up in Nagano in the mountain area, but it was still extremely hot. And we were all so exhausted at the end of the day, but there were still activities planned for us for the evening and everything. And we were all super tired, but we just kept going. So I was thinking of that also as I was speaking with her and remembering we've really got to respect the plans that people put in place for us when they have us in Japan or take us on an activity or plan a business trip or a secondment or an activity where we're going to visit a factory or visit a a workplace, right? That's one of the things she said, is just, even though you might be feeling some way, respect the people who've planned something for you,
right?
And do it. Yeah.
Maybe you might not have as much me time as you were thinking you might, right? And you might have been planning something that you wanted to do, might not be possible this time round.
Yeah. And I think she also, here, she sounds like in Japan, she really had her eyes open all the time for anything that was going on, and must have been, I can see her almost going, yay, and standing there and being very excited, and hands sort of getting all excited in the air as well, as they're explaining these different things to her, and she's seeing the way that they were doing the activities in the industry, right? So she must have really exhibited such a great enthusiasm, and I think that's what also is so important, because everybody is watching you in Japan. Even though you might be walking around the neighborhood or whatever, people are watching you. So in that situation, we are always under observation of how we're reacting. And that reflects on you ultimately as a New Zealander in Japan, I believe.
Definitely. Even, if you are just a ippanjin here, just a regular member of society here, you're definitely always under observation. But it sounds like she has some great insights to take back to New Zealand from her time that will really benefit the industry that she works in New Zealand.
I think one of the really good things she said was the standardizing of the way of doing things. And that made me think, it's absolutely what Japanese companies do, is make the policy, make the manual. And maybe they can be a little bit hesitant to deviate from that, but there's a reason for it ultimately, that it makes it very easy if people are following the standard process and not having to learn or try to do something different, right? You can suggest changes to make it incrementally better and improve things. That's absolutely true. But the standardization she mentioned, and I think also Monique said future-proofing the industry through that, which was just a great comment.
We're definitely experiencing, I think this year we had 3 typhoons coming at Japan at one time so far already. And I was thinking, I've never seen that before in the 20 years I've been here. I've never seen 3 typhoons coming towards Japan at the same time before. So we really are dealing with different things that need to be future-proofed for as much as we can.
But New Zealand's having its own experience of weather events, and there must be such a lot to learn from this, especially in the fisheries industry, but other industries too. So that was just awesome. I didn't even know, like, even the beginning there where we talked about Victoria University having that coastal ecosystem laboratory, like what? These things I don't know, but there's just so much potential, and I hope it's encouraged people to think about what kinds of scholarships and adventures there might be waiting that you haven't found out about between New Zealand and Japan. So if you're wanting to come here, do that. That's
amazing, right? So how many other opportunities there might be out there you just don't know about that could really change the trajectory of your life.
Absolutely. We know Mombasho, of course, has been there for a long time. The Japanese government education ministry has scholarships, Mombasho. But we've also heard recently about other ones that are Japan and Korea combined, coming from New Zealand, study tours and things like that. But it's just, there seems to be so many more, but you have to find it. You have to do the work.
Yes. Good luck with finding them.
Good luck, Monique, and good luck to anybody who's heard this and thinks that they would love to apply for the scholarship. You know it's going to happen if you put the work in.
Alrighty. Well, that's all we have for this episode. See you again on Jandals in Japan. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you check out our guests' links in the show notes.
This podcast is brought to you today by Catherine O'Connell Law and Pod Launch with Jane. If you have a great story you think should be on the show, come and find us on LinkedIn or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Mata ne!